Now, Mrs. Ralston, try and think. Think!
I can't think. My head's numb.
Mrs. Boyle had only just been killed when you got to her. Are you sure you didn't hear anyone as you came along the hallway from the kitchen?
No, I don't think so. Just the radio blaring out in here. I couldn't hear anything else with that, could I?
That was clearly the murderer's idea.
How could I hear anything else?
Might have done. If the murderer had left that way, he might have heard you coming from the kitchen and slipped up the back stairs or into the dining room.
I think... I'm not sure. I heard a door creak and shut just as I came out of the kitchen.
Which door?
I don't know.
Come on, Mrs. Ralston, try and think. Upstairs, downstairs, close at hand, right, left.
I don't know, I tell you. I'm not even sure I heard anything.
Can't you stop bullying her? Can't you see she's all in?
We're investigating a murder, Mr. Ralston. Up to now, no one's taken this thing seriously. Mrs. Boyle didn't. She held out at me with information. You all held out on me. Well, Mrs. Boyle is dead. And if we don't get to the bottom of this thing, and quickly mind, there's going to be another death.
Another? But that's nonsense. Why?
Because there were 3 little blind mice.
Right, a death for each of them, but why another death here?
Because there are only 2 addresses in the notebook we found. Now, at 24 Culver Street, there's only 1 possible victim. But here at Monkswell Manor, there's a much wider field.
But surely it would be a most unlikely coincidence that there should be 2 people. Both brought here by chance, each with a share in the Longridge Farm case.
Not quite so much of a coincidence as you might think. Think it out, Miss Casewell. Now, I want to get down quite clearly where everyone was at the time the murder was committed. I've already got Mrs. Ralston's statement. You were in the kitchen preparing vegetables. You came through the swing door, along the passageway, through the hallway, and in here. The radio was blaring out, but the hall was dark. You switched the light on, saw Mrs. Boyle, and screamed.
Yes, I screamed and screamed. And at last people came.
Yes, as you say, people came. A lot of people came from a lot of different directions, all arriving more or less at once. Now, when I got out to trace the telephone wire around to the front door, you, Mr. Ralston, went upstairs to the room that you and Mrs. Ralston occupied and tried the extension telephone there. Where were you when you heard Mrs. Ralston scream?
I was still up in our bedroom. Extension telephone was dead too. I looked out the window to see if I could see any sign of the wires being cut there, but I couldn't. Just after I closed the window again, I heard Molly scream and I rushed down.
These simple actions took you a rather long time, don't you think?
No, I don't think so.
I should say you definitely took your time over this.
I was thinking about something.
Very well. Now, Mr. Wren, we'll have your account.
I was in the kitchen, seeing if there was anything I could do to help Mrs. Ralston. I adore cooking. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom.
Why?
It's a perfectly natural thing to go to one's bedroom, don't you think? I mean, one does want to be alone sometimes.
You went up to your bedroom because you wanted to be alone?
And I wanted to brush my hair and tidy up.
You wanted to brush your hair.
Anyway, that's where I was.
You heard Mrs. Ralston scream,
Yes.
and you came down.
Yes.
Funny that you and Mr. Ralston didn't meet on the stairs.
I went down by the back stairs. They're closer to my room.
Did you go up by the back stairs, or did you come through here?
I went up by the back stairs too.
Mr. Paracini.
I have told you. I was playing the piano in the drawing room. You're there, Inspector.
Did anyone hear you?
I do not expect so. I was playing very, very softly, with one finger, so.
Would you play 2 blind mice?
Yes, it is a very catchy little tune. How shall I say, a haunting little tune? Don't you all agree?
I think it's horrible.
And yet it runs in people's heads. Someone was whistling it too.
Whistling it? Where?
Oh, I am not certain. Perhaps in the front hall, perhaps on the stairs, perhaps even upstairs in the bedroom.
Who was whistling 3 blind mice? Are you making this up, Mr. Paracini?
No, no, Inspector. I beg your pardon, Sergeant. I would not do anything like that.
Oh, very well. You were playing the piano.
With one finger, sir. And then I hear the radio playing very loudly. Someone is shouting at it. It offends my ears. And after that, suddenly, I hear Mrs. Ralston scream.
Mr. Ralston upstairs, Mr. Wren upstairs, Mr. Perugini in the drawing room, Miss Casewell.
I was writing letters in the library.
Could you hear what was going on in here?
No, I didn't hear anything until Mrs. Ralston screamed.
So you came in here?
Yes,
At once?
I think so.
You say you were writing letters when you heard Mrs. Ralston scream.
Yes,
And you got up hurriedly and came in here.
yes.
And yet, there doesn't seem to be an unfinished letter on the writing table in the library.
I brought it with me.
Dearest Jessie. Friend of yours? Or relation?
It's none of your business.
Perhaps not. You know, if I was to hear someone screaming blue murder when I was writing letters, I don't believe I'd take the time to pick up my letter, fold it, and put it in my handbag before going to see what the matter was.
You wouldn't. How interesting.
Now, Major Metcalf, you say you were in the cellars. Why?
Looking around. Just looking around. I looked into that cupboard place underneath the stairs near the kitchen. A lot of junk and sports tackle. And I noticed there was another door inside it. And I opened it and I saw a flight of steps. I was curious and I went down. Nice cellars, you thought.
Glad you like them.
Not at all. Seems to be the crypt of an old monastery, I should say. Probably why this place is called Monkswell.
We are not engaged in an antiquarian search, Major Metcalf. We are investigating a murder. Try to remember that. Now, Mrs. Ralston has said that she has heard a door shut with a faint creak. That particular door shuts with a creak. It may be, you know, that after killing Mrs. Boyle, the murderer, hearing Mrs. Ralston coming from the kitchen, slipped into that cupboard, pulling the door behind him.
A lot of things could be.
There would have to be fingerprints on the inside of the cupboard.
Mine are there all right, but most criminals are careful to use gloves, aren't they?
It's usual, but all criminals slip up sooner or later.
I wonder, Sergeant, if that's really true.
Look, aren't we wasting time? There's only one
Mr.
person.
Ralston, I'm in charge of this investigation.
Fine.
Mr. Ralston. Thank you. Now, you've got to establish opportunity, you know, as well as motive. Now let me tell you this. You all had opportunity. What? Anyone could go up by one set of stairs and come down by the other. Anyone could slip into the cellars by a door near the kitchen and come up by a trapdoor at the bottom of the stairs over there. The crucial point is, all of you were alone at the time the murder was committed.
But look here. You know pretty well who it was who killed that woman in Culver Street. You think it was the eldest of the 3 children at the farm, a mentally abnormal young man who is now 23 years of age. Well, there's only one person here who fits the bill.
It's not true. It's not true. You're all against me. Everyone's always been against me. You're gonna frame me for murder. Persecution, that's what it is. It's persecution!
Steady, lads.
It's all right, Chris. It's all right. Nobody's against you. Tell him it's all right.
You don't frame people.
Tell him you're not going to arrest him.
I'm not going to arrest anybody. To do that, you've got to have evidence.
Molly, you crazy, and you too. There's only one person here who fits the bill, and if only as a safety measure, he ought to be put under arrest. It's only fair to the rest of us.
Wait, Chance. Wait. Sergeant Trotter, can I talk to you a minute?
Well, certainly. Will the rest of you please go into the dining room?
I'm staying.
No, Giles. You too, please.
Molly, I'm staying. I don't know what's come over you.
Please, Giles.
Now, Mrs. Ralston, what was it you wanted to say to me?
Sergeant Trotter, you think that this crazy killer must be the eldest of those 3 children at the farm. But you don't know that, do you?
We actually don't know a thing. All we've got so far is that the woman who went with her husband in mistreating and starving those children has been killed. That the woman magistrate responsible for placing them there has been killed. The telephone wire that linked me with police headquarters has been cut.
But you don't even know that. It may have just been the snow.
No, Mrs. Ralston, it was deliberately cut. Found the place just outside the front door.
See.
Sit down, Mrs. Ralston.
But all the same, you don't know.
I'm going by probability. It all points one way. Mental instability, childish mentality, desertion from the army and the psychiatrist's report.
I know, and therefore it all seems to point to Christopher. But I don't believe it is Christopher. There must be other possibilities.
Such as?
Hadn't those children any relations at all?
The mother was a drunk. She died soon after the children were taken away from her.
And what their father?
He was an army sergeant serving abroad. If he's alive, he's been discharged from the army by now.
You don't know where he is now.
Tracing may take some time. But let me tell you, Mrs. Ralston, the police have taken every eventuality into account.
But you don't know where he is at this minute. And if the son was mentally unstable, then the father may be as well.
It's possible.
And if he came home, after being imprisoned with the Japs perhaps, if he came home and found his wife dead, and that his children had gone through some terrible experience and that one of them had died through it, he might go off his head a bit and want revenge.
That's only a surmise.
But it's possible.
Oh yes, it's very possible.
So the murderer may be middle-aged, or even old. When I said the police had rung up, Major Metcalf looked frightfully upset. He really was. I saw his face.
Metcalf.
Middle-aged. A soldier. I know, he seems quite nice and perfectly normal, but it mightn't show, might it?
No, it often doesn't show.
So Christopher's not the only suspect. There's Major Metcalf as well.
Any other suggestions?
Pedavicini did drop the poker when I said the police had rung up.
Perugini.
He seems quite old and foreign and everything, but he mightn't be as old as he looks. He moves like a much younger man, and he's definitely got makeup on his face. Miss Casewell noticed it too. He might... I know, it sounds very melodramatic, but he might be disguised.
Very anxious, aren't you, that it shouldn't be Christopher Wren?
Oh, I don't know. Just seems so helpless somehow. And so unhappy.
Let me tell you something, Mrs. Ralston. I've had all the possibilities in my mind ever since the beginning. The boy Georgie, the father, and there was a sister, you know.
The sister.
Yes, it might have been a woman who killed Marine Lion. The man's felt hat pulled down and the scarf pulled up. And the killer whispered, you know. It's the voice that gives the sex away. Yes, it might have been a woman.
Miss Casewell.
She seems a bit old for the part. Yes, there's a very wide field. There's yourself, for instance.
Me?
Yes, you're about the right age.
How could
No. There you tell me I have no means of checking at this moment. And then there's your husband.
Giles? Don't be ridiculous.
He and Christopher Wren are much of an age. Say, Christopher Wren looks younger than his years and your husband looks older. Actual age is very hard to tell. How long did you know your husband? How much do you know about your husband, Mrs. Ralston?
How much do I know about Giles? Don't be silly.
You've been married how long?
Exactly a year.
And you met him where?
At a dance in London. We went to the park.
Did you meet his people?
He hasn't any people. They're all dead.
They're all dead.
Yes, but you make it sound all wrong. His father was a barrister, and his mother died when he was a baby.
You're only telling me what he told you.
Well, yes, but
You don't know it of your own knowledge.
it's outrageous.
You'd be surprised, Mrs. Ralston, how many cases rather like yours we get. Especially since the war. Homes broken up and families dead. Fellow says he's been in the Air Force or just finished his army training. Parents dead, no relations. There aren't any backgrounds nowadays, and young people settle their own affairs. They meet and marry. It was parents and relatives who used to make the inquiries before consenting to an engagement. It's all done away with. Girl just marries some man. Shouldn't find out for a year or two that he's an absconding bank clerk or an army reserve, something equally undesirable. How long did you know Giles Wilson when you married him?
Just 3 weeks.
And you didn't know anything about him?
That's not true. I know everything about him. I know just the sort of person he is. He's Giles. And it's absolutely absurd for you to suggest that he's some horrible, crazy, homicidal maniac. Why, Giles wasn't even in London yesterday when the murder took place.
Where was he? Here?
No, he went across country to get some wire netting for our chickens.
Bring him back with him.
No, it turned out to be the wrong kind.
Only 30 miles from London, aren't you? Oh, you can ABC. An hour by train, a little longer by car.
I tell you, Giles wasn't in London.
Just a minute, Mrs. Ralston. This your husband's coat?
Yes?
Evening paper. Yesterday's. Sold on the streets of London about 3:30 yesterday afternoon.
I don't believe it.
Don't you? Don't you?
Molly,
Oh, you startled me.
where is he? Where's he gone?
Who?
The sergeant.
Oh, he went out that way.
Oh, I could get away somewhere. Somehow. Is there any place I could hide? In the house?
Hi.
Yes.
Why?
From him, darling. They're all against me. They're gonna say that I committed these murders, especially your husband.
Never mind him. Chris. You can't go on running away from things all your life.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's true. Isn't it?
Yes. It's quite true.
You've got to grow up sometime, Chris.
I wish I hadn't.
Your name isn't really Christopher Wren, is it?
No.
And you're not really trained to be an architect.
No.
Then why did you...
Call myself Christopher Wren? It amused me. And they used to laugh at me in school and call me little Christopher Robin. Robin, Wren, association of ideas. It was horrible being in school.
What's your real name?
We needn't go into that. I ran away whilst doing my army service. It was all so beastly. I hated it. Yes. I'm just like the unknown murderer. I told you I was the one the specifications fitted. See, my mother.
Yes? Your mother?
Everything would have been all right if she hadn't died. She would have looked after me, taken care of me.
You can't go on being looked after all your life, Chris. Things happen to you, and you've got to bear them. You've got to go on just as usual.
One can't do that.
Yes? One can.
You mean you have?
Yes.
What was it? Something very bad?
Something I've never forgotten.
Was it to do with Giles?
No, it was long before I met him.
You must have been very young. Almost a child.
Perhaps that's why it was so awful. It was horrible. I tried to put it out of my mind. I tried never to think about it.
So, you're running away too. Running away from your problems instead of facing them.
Yes. Perhaps, in a way, I am. Considering that I never saw you until yesterday, we seem to know each other rather well.
Yes, it's odd, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. Perhaps there's some sort of sympathy between us.
Anyway, I think I should stick it out.
Well, frankly, what else can you do?
I could pinch the sergeant's skis. I ski quite well.
That would be frightfully stupid. It would be almost like admitting you're guilty.
Sergeant Trotter thinks I'm guilty.
No, he doesn't. At least, I know what he thinks. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him!
Who?
Sergeant Trotter. He puts things into your head. Things that aren't true. They can't possibly be true.
What is all this?
I don't believe it. I won't believe it.
What don't you believe? Come on. Out with it.
You see this?
Yes?
Yesterday's evening paper. A London paper. And it was in Giles' overcoat pocket. But Giles didn't go to London yesterday!
Well, if he was here all day...
But he wasn't! He went out in the car to look for chicken wire, but he couldn't find any.
That's all right. Maybe he did go up to London after all.
Then why shouldn't he tell me he did? Why wouldn't he been racing all around the countryside?
Well, perhaps the news of this murder...
Giles didn't know about the murder. Or did he? Did he?
Good grief, Molly, you don't think... The sergeant doesn't think that...
I don't know what the sergeant thinks. And he can make you think things about people. You ask yourself questions, and you begin to doubt. You think that somebody you love and know well might be a stranger. That's what happens in a nightmare. You're somewhere in the middle of friends, and you look at their faces, and suddenly they're not your friends any longer. They're different people, just pretending. Perhaps you can't trust anybody. Perhaps everybody's a stranger.
I seem to be interrupting something.
No. No, we were just talking. I must go to the kitchen. There's the pie and potatoes, and I must do the spinach.
I'll come give you a...
No, you won't.
Giles?
You keep out of the kitchen and keep away from my wife, Ren.
Now really, look here.
You keep away from my wife. She's not going to be the next victim.
So that's what you think of me?
I've already said so, haven't I? There's a killer on the loose in this house, and it seems to me that you fit the bill.
I'm not the only one who fits the bill.
I don't see who else does.
How blind are you? Or do you just pretend to be blind?
I tell you, I'm worrying about my wife's safety.
So am I! I'm not going to let you be alone with her.
What?
Chris!